Welcome back, Queen, to another episode of According to Annie. I am so excited to be dropping on with you today and sharing some updates on what's been going on in my life. Oh my goodness. I'm Annie. I am your host. If you are new, hello and welcome. It's an honor to have you here. And if you are an OG, welcome back. Thank you. I love you. Let's delve straight into it today. So, if you are new here, maybe you're not aware that I am relocating my entire life and my business across the other side of the world to Greece. I recently went to Greece in June for 2 months, and while I was over there, it was very clear that that was where I needed to be for the next part of my journey. And so I was so excited to come home and start organizing all of my life and pack up and follow my heart across the other side of the world. So I knew that this would be a little bit of unfamiliar territory for me. So what I actually chose to do was invest and have someone help me through the process. And so if you've recently seen my stories or you've recently seen my posts, you will have seen that it hasn't quite gone the way that I was hoping it was going to go. And so I want to share today with you the full story of what has unfolded over the past few weeks as I am transitioning at the moment through this phase, this season of my life and business. And yeah, I want to be really transparent with you and explain to you how I've been navigating and how I've been working through what has actually come up. So let's delve into all of the juiciness today. So about 13 weeks ago, I actually got the ball rolling before I came home from Greece. And the reason for that was because every time I was dropping into meditation, I was getting some pretty clear downloads that it would be a challenge and there would be a lot that needs to be organized. And so I needed to prepare myself and set myself up because as soon as I landed back in Australia, it would have been very easy to be like, it's all too hard. I can't deal with it, and just stay in my comfort zone and stay here in Australia. So it was very clear and evident that I actually needed to start implementing things before I landed back in Australia. And so I connected with someone who was a referral. And this was what they did, that the company did all of these things. They helped you with the relocation. They helped you with your visas. They helped you with your business. So closing down your business and opening up your international business, because obviously I'm going global now. And so they helped you with all of that process. And so the referral came from someone who had already started that process. So they had already been going through that. So it was a reputable company, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't just some random Google search that I did online and found this random place. There was people that had actually worked with this company before. And so I was like, okay, it's legit. It's cool. We can deal with this. So I dropped the payment down. I had the phone call with them, and it was explained to me that it was very much a done for you service. And so everything would be taken care of, everything would be organized, it would just be smooth sailing. Any questions that I had, they were there to support me through the entire process. I was like, great, this sounds exactly what I need. So by all means, threw my credit card at them and said, let's get started. And so part of the process was also having a WhatsApp we have been in and out of this chat, and because I wasn't actually leaving the country until middle of December, they said that there were some things that we didn't need to sort out just now, and we would sort them out as things got closer. So I was like, okay, cool, amazing, I'm totally cool with that. So that was all fine. And then from there, there'd been conversations back and forth, and then there hadn't been any phone calls like I had been promised, or I don't know. There was something that was telling me something wasn't quite right. And so I was like, maybe I need to actually look into this. And so in the meantime, I've sold absolutely everything. I've sold everything that I had in my house. I've sold my car. I've terminated my lease, like everything. My entire life was banked on these people coming through with the goods for me. And I had to move out of my house on the Saturday of this particular week. Anyway, that week I got a message come through from Source, from in my downloads, to say maybe you just need to like follow through, just like follow up on this. So I send a message through to the chat and I express my unhappiness, and I say, like, I'm really disappointed in the service. I haven't been, kept in the loop. I don't know what's going on. I've literally sold everything. I don't know where we're at. I haven't had any phone calls. I suppose, kind of assumed that you guys would tell me when you needed me, and all of that. Anyway, that was on the Thursday that I had sent that through. And in the meantime, I started to get a little bit panicked, and I thought maybe I need to take matters into my own hands. So I started doing a little bit of Google researching. I was like, what is it that I actually need to do? And looking into like the Greece visa application, there was quite a list of shit that needed to be sorted. And so I was like, oh, this seems like a lot. My friend who had done it, she relocated to Bali. And so obviously the rules for Bali are completely different to the rules for Greece. And she didn't have to do half of these things that was on my visa application in order to have it processed. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. Anyway, one of the guys finally got back into the chat and was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't realize. I just assumed that you'd been working with the other guy and everything had been sorted and you'd been having your calls and like everything was, going smoothly. And I was like, yeah, no, that hasn't been the case. I haven't even had one call. And he was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. This is not how we do business. And he was super apologetic. And he took full responsibility and was like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed, let's jump on a call. So we jumped on a call on the next day, which was the Friday. Now, this is the last night that I'm spending in my apartment, and I'm sleeping on the floor because I've literally sold everything. Everything's been gone and sold, and I'm moving out of the apartment. And so I'm sleeping on the floor, and we jump on this call. He is based in Bulgaria, so completely different time zone. So I think the call was like 9 p.m. or something like that. And he's like, how are you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling very stressed. And he was like, understandable. He's like, it's all right, we've got it. He's like, when are you leaving? And I said, well, I'm aiming to leave the 12th of December. Like that's when I've got my flight booked for. And he was like, okay, all right, we've still got a month. And I was like, well, yes, we do have a month technically, but I said, like, I'm moving out of this apartment as of tomorrow, so I'm not going to have an address if we needed to use an address for any of the paperwork. And I'm not going to essentially have any paperwork, like whatever it is has been boxed and is going into storage. And he was like, okay, that's cool, we can make this work. Anyway, so he runs me through the options of the visa options of what my choices are. And one was okay. Like, I definitely could have met some of the requirements, but one of the requirements was that you needed to have like I think it was like 28,000 euro in your bank account before you landed in Greece. And I was like, well, I don't have that. So he's like, well, we can't go through with that visa application. So let's go with this visa application. But this visa application is going to require that you get, a list of all of these requirements. And I was like, oh, okay, this is quite an extensive list of things. And so the things were like a medical check, a criminal check. You had to have proof of income. You had to have proof of your company existing, like a letter from your accountant. You had to have a certain amount of income that in order to be able to have this visa. You had to have passport photos. You had to have copies of your passport. You have to have your passport with a certain amount of time and a certain amount of pages in it. You have to have insurance, and you have to have a return flight. Like, there's all of these things that you have to have. And I was like, oh my gosh, like starting to panic because I'm like, do I have enough time to get all of this done before, in my mind, I'm like, before I leave Queensland, because I'm leaving Queensland and then I'm going back to Victoria to spend some last minute time with the family that I do have there. And so in my mind, I'm like, all of it needs to be sorted and before I get to Victoria. Anyway, so I'm like on the mad rush to get all of this paperwork sorted and together. In the meantime, I've moved out of my apartment and I am in an Airbnb. And I just remember trying really hard to keep my nervous system relaxed. I really was trying to just compose myself and keep it together. And I'd done well, but the Monday was the day that all of my household stuff and what was left of it, which was about, I don't know, 12 boxes or something like that. It wasn't much at all. The removalist was coming to collect from my apartment to move it into storage. And so in the moment, all I could think of was these photos. I needed to find my passport photos because I knew that I had copies. And I messaged my girlfriend and I say to her, oh my goodness, I need some support. Like, I'm not coping right now. I feel really stressed. And she rings me and she's like, okay, babe, like, what's going on? And I was like, I can't do this. Mind you, by this stage, I've got back to my apartment. I'm opening boxes like a frantic woman and I'm trying to find these damn photos. And she's like, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm trying to find my passport photos. And she's like, okay. She's like, you know that you can just go to the post office and just get new ones. And my brain was not functioning. Like, my nervous system was so shot that I was not listening to the words that she was saying. And she was trying to help me find the solutions. And I honestly felt like there was no solution to my situation. And I said to her, no, you don't understand. Like, I have to have these ones. These ones are the ones that match my passport. And she was like, babe, that doesn't make sense because people wouldn't have, photos from their passport if it's more than 5 years ago. Like, that doesn't make sense. Just go to the post office and get new ones. And I was like, no, you don't understand. You don't get it. Like, I have to get these photos. Anyway, she just let me have my meltdown. And anyway, I found these photos and I said to her, okay, I found them. Okay, good. I'm all good now. Okay, amazing. And she said to me, I want you to sit down. I'm like, okay. And so I sit down. She's like, close your eyes. I'm like, okay. She's like, take some deep breaths. So I take some deep breaths. And then, bam, it hits. The tears come, the snot comes, the sobbing, the overwhelm. Finally, my body is like, finally, you're letting me release all of this tension, this stress, all of this built up anxiety in your body. You're finally letting it out. And I was having a full blown meltdown. And I'm holding the phone and we're both just sitting there in absolute silence. And she's just letting me have my process. And I'm crying and I'm angry and I'm pissed off at the situation. And after I kind of had my meltdown, she said to me, what emotions are you feeling right now? And I said, I feel angry. I feel sad. I feel grief. I feel excited. I feel scared. I feel joy. I said, I feel like all of them. And she was like, that's good. Like, they all can coexist at the same time. Now, this is the shit that I teach on. Yeah. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because no matter how much of the work we've done, sometimes we need some support too. Sometimes we need to have someone that actually holds that space for us. Yeah. And so she was reminding me of all of these things that I teach with other women that come into my world. And she was like, all of these can exist at the same time, Annie. And I was like, yeah, I understand that. And she's like, what are you angry at? And I said, I'm angry that I paid someone to eliminate all of this stress and I'm still here feeling the stress. And she was like, okay. And as I said that, I reflected on what I had actually just said. And I said to her, maybe that's the lesson in this. And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, maybe that's the lesson that I need to learn, that the overwhelm and, these feelings, like, yes, it's not ideal. And yes, it's quite stressful. but perhaps is this a pattern? Yeah. And I'm very good at self-awareness for myself and really reflecting and creating that time and space. And I said to her, is this a pattern? Do I think that if I just pay somebody that will eliminate me feeling the feelings? And that's what I'm angry at, that I thought that paying someone would eliminate me feeling this. But the truth is that yes, some of those feelings were very much coming from the chaos of what I just found out about my visa not being sorted, or anything really being sorted. So yes, there was an element of that, but I also think that it was much deeper than that. And it was another ego death that I am going through. And I've been through so many of these over the last few years because I'm rapidly evolving. And so every time we evolve and we step into a new version of who we're becoming, we have to let go of that version of who we have been, because that version has got us to where we are. And then to step into the next level of who we're becoming, we have to step into the next level of who we are becoming. And so there was actually so much that was going on the surface that I really probably hadn't allowed myself a lot of time and space to feel through. I mean, I definitely had like a little bit of a ceremony. And if you've listened to my episode, you will have heard me talk about what happened in the full moon ceremony. So there was definitely that time that I definitely allowed myself to feel some of the feelings, but I think it was definitely a lot deeper, and it was this ego death of letting go of who I've been. This Sunshine Coast has been one of the biggest transformational places that I've been in. It's almost like I see Sunny Coast as this little cocoon that I got to be in to really allow myself to fall apart, yeah, to let go and really put myself back together, to rebuild the trust in myself. And I've done so much like deep healing work, and I've met my darkest days in this space, and that has somewhat become safe. Sunshine Coast has become a safe haven for me because it's where I've learned to rebuild the trust in myself. It's where I've learned to let go. It's where I've learned to drop my walls. It's where I've learned to love myself unconditionally. It's where I've forgiven so many people and let go of so much shame and pain and hurt and fear and guilt. And I've really embodied like freedom, like embodiment of freedom. I've really stepped into that, and I've really learned to trust who I am at the core and stop getting validation from everybody else. And so the woman that I've become right now in this moment, and that's stepping into this next level of my life, is I really believe the big catalyst has been Sunshine Coast. And so packing up and leaving behind this beautiful place that's held me in the most darkest of my days is also scary. Yeah. It's what's been safe. It's what I've felt familiar with. And so leaving behind that, I think, was another level of where all these feelings and these emotions and this anxiety was coming from, and this meltdown essentially. And so when I was reflecting, I was like, perhaps I could never avoid these feelings. You know, perhaps there was a part of me that thought I could avoid it because I paid someone. But the truth is that no one can escape the feelings that come with expansion. No matter how much you pay someone, that's actually a huge part of the process. We have to allow ourselves to fall apart in order to rise again. Like that is what is needed. And so it was just this beautiful reflection that I was having mid meltdown, where I was like, maybe this is a bit deeper than what I thought it was. But as the scenario kept unraveling, I know that the universe was just, it is, not was, is, because it still hasn't come together yet. And we are, you know, the 19th of November. So depending on when you're listening to this episode. But I really feel like the universe is really testing me right now to see, am I going to stay in love, or am I going to choose to lean into the fear and fall prey to all of that? Like it's testing me to a new level. And having that meltdown was something that I have not experienced for many years. I feel like I have learned a lot of tools, a lot of modalities over the years to really support myself. And so I met a new edge by having this meltdown, and it was a beautiful unfolding for me to see what my threshold is, to see what would it actually take for myself to have a meltdown. And when I talk about a meltdown, I want to just emphasize, like, I do create a lot of containers for myself to feel my feelings. I am always, having little rage parties, or I'm always having like really emotional settings where I'm allowing myself to feel whatever is coming up. But this was the first time that I felt out of control. And so I've created moments to allow myself to feel the feelings, but it's been in a controlled state. And so when I'm talking about this, having a meltdown, I'm talking about feeling out of control and having the meltdown where my nervous system and my brain was not functioning, and it felt very out of my control, and it came over me, and I was kind of very chaotic, very frantic, very just super overwhelmed. It was like my brain was not working. It was like my brain completely froze and couldn't make sense of the situation. And so it's been a very long time that I have reacted this way, being out of control. That definitely felt like a situation or an example or an experience that was out of control, and I didn't feel like I was in control of it. So yes, I don't want you to think that having a meltdown is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's about learning how to create those containers and those spaces for you to actually have the meltdown, so that you don't project onto other people, so that you don't lash out. Luckily, my beautiful friend that was helping me through the process has also done a lot of work. And so she could see what was going on. But while I'm telling her, you don't understand, that was just me projecting. That's all that was. And she was able to hold that space. So I think it is important to understand that meltdowns are necessary, but it's about the way that we go about it and making sure that we have those sacred containers that we create for ourselves, so that we don't project onto other people. And so as I've been going through this process of sorting everything out, there has been multiple challenges that have come along the way since I found out that nothing has been sorted. So in the meantime, I'm applying for my criminal check. So that's come through. So I've finally got the criminal check. And then the medical certificate that needs to be completed. So that was also another challenge in itself, because I have not been sick since I've been up here on the sunny coast. And so I have not needed to have a doctor. I haven't needed to have a GP or anything like that. And so trying to find a GP up here has proven to be quite difficult, because a lot of places aren't accepting new patients. And so I rang like a couple of different places, and they were like, sorry, we're not taking new patients. One place was like, oh, we're taking new patients, but you're going to have 2 appointments. So the first one, you're going to have to come in. We're going to have to do a consultation. And then the second appointment, which will be on a different day, you'll be able to come in, and we will like sort out whatever it is that you need sorting. And I'm like, I need this done like ASAP. And then the last place that I was able to get into, he was this beautiful Chinese man, but he was very hard to understand. He was not understanding me either. And so you have this paperwork that you have to fill out, the doctor has to fill out. And it's all about, like making sure that I'm in good health, because essentially what Greece want to know is that I'm not going to be a financial burden on the healthcare system. That's the whole idea of this paperwork. And so it's like they want to know, like, do I have drug addiction? Do I have hallucinations or psychotic episodes? And then was I free of the diseases that were listed in the quarantine list? And so the doctor's like, I've never seen one of these forms before. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, and like, you're a new patient. I don't know any of your medical history. And I was like, yes, I understand that. And he's like, so I don't know if you've got drug addiction. I don't know if you've got hallucinations. I don't know if you've got psychotic episodes that happen or not. And I was like, surely you can look at me and see that I'm not a drug addict. And he was like, well, yes, I mean, you look like you're in good health. But he's like, this is a legal document at the end of the day. And I don't have your history. And he's like, do you have a local GP? And I was like, well, no, I don't, because I haven't been sick. So I haven't needed to see a doctor. Like, how bad is that? That it's like, I mean, it's great that I haven't been sick, that I haven't needed a doctor, but it kind of went against me for not having a medical history. Anyway, so he was like, and what's the list of quarantine diseases? And I was like, well, I don't know. I assumed as a doctor that you would know what they were talking about. And he was like, I have no idea what this list is. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we're Googling in the medical clinic. We're both Googling. He's on his computer, I'm on my phone. And we're Googling to see if we can find what this list of diseases is that I supposedly need to be checked for. Anyway, we end up finding it, thank goodness. And most of the list of the diseases we don't have here in Australia. It was like yellow fever, and it was like smallpox, and it was a few other things like that we don't have. And he was like, well, we don't have them here, so it'd be very unlikely for you to have those diseases. And he's like, and we can't really test for them because we don't do those kind of testings for those diseases. We don't have them. And I was like, okay, great. So can you just sign the paperwork then? And he was like, well, yeah, but I feel like I'm going to have to attach a medical certificate to explain these things. And I'm like, perfect. No worries. That's fine. So he fills out the paperwork, and he dates and signs it, and he's like, okay, cool. And then he like writes me up a medical certificate. And he's like, Anastasia Knight is a new patient of ours, so we don't actually have a medical history. And I'm like, oh man, is this going to go against me in my bloody application process? And then he's like, and it's unlikely that she's to have any of these diseases, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay. So I'm like, okay, hopefully, maybe I just won't give the application process that letter. But then on the document that you have to submit to the visa application place, he actually wrote on that and said, please see medical certificate. So I was like, okay, radio, I'm going to have to submit it now. Anyway, so it'll all be fine. I'm sure it'll all work out. So that's been that. And then I have all of the paperwork, all of the documents. I have all the contracts. I have everything that I need. So I reached back out to this company, and I'm like, all right, I'm pretty sure that like I've got everything covered. And he's like, okay, great. He's like, so now you need to go in person to the Greek embassy, and you have to have an appointment. And I'm like, oh, I can't do this online or like mail it. He's like, no, you need to, part of the Greek requirements, you have to have an interview and you have to go in. So I'm like, of course, that's what I have to do. So I'm like, okay, well, where's the Greek embassy in Queensland? I'm thinking it's probably going to be in Brisbane, which is about 45 minutes from me, which is not too bad, but I don't have a car. So I'm like, I'm going to have to hit up one of my girlfriends and get her to take me down. Anyway, so I Google to have a look and see where the Greek embassy is, and there's not one in Queensland. I'm like, of course there's not one in Queensland. Wow, universe, you are testing me to the max right now. So I'm like, okay, where is the next one? And I was like, okay, there's one in Victoria. Perfect. I'm going to Victoria. I'll book it with the timing of me, landing in Melbourne, Victoria, and I'll go to the office, and then I'll go to Bendigo, and that's where my family is. I was like, perfect. This is going to work out great. So I jump on the phone and I speak to the Greek embassy in Melbourne, and I was like, oh, I'm coming to Victoria from Queensland. I wanted to book an appointment for my visa application. And she was like, oh, we don't have anything until the end of the year. Until the new year. And I was like, what do you mean? Like nothing at all? So like, when's the next available? And she's like, not until 2024. I was like, great. So amazing. So I was like, what do I do now? Because I need to get this ball rolling. And she was like, well, you could try Sydney and see if they have a spot. I was like, okay, I'll try Sydney. So I ring Sydney, and I'm like, oh, hi, like I've got some questions just in regards to the visa application. And then I also need to make an appointment if you've got a spot. And she says to me, have you emailed us yet?
And I said, no, I haven't. And she's like, okay, you'll need to email first and then we'll call you. I was like, okay, great. So I send through an email with my questions. She rings me back and she answers my questions. And then she's like, all right, we can get you an appointment on Monday, which would be like Monday of this week coming. And I said to her, I haven't, there's still a couple of bits of paperwork that I'm waiting on. I don't think that I'm going to have enough paperwork by Monday. And she was like, well, there's no point in you having the appointment because you need all of your paperwork or we can't process your application. So I was like, okay, so when would the next available be? And she's like, well, we could get you in Friday. And I'm like, okay, perfect. Let's do Friday. And she's like, so you're obviously going to be flying in. So let's book it for the afternoon to give you time to get a flight. I'm like, great, thank you. And so in my head, I'm like trying to work out my process because originally I was planning on leaving Sunny Coast on the 22nd of November, flying back to Victoria, and then flying out from Melbourne, Victoria, to Greece on the 12th of December. So now I'm like, now I've got an extra flight that I have to go from. I have to get into Sydney on the Friday. So I ummed and ahed about staying in Queensland for a few extra days, but I'm going to have my huge big suitcase, and I was like, I don't really want to be lugging that around from Queensland to Sydney to the Greek embassy, and then from Sydney to Victoria. So I've got a girlfriend who recently moved from Sunny Coast down to Victoria. So I rang her and I said, if I book my flight for the 22nd, can I stay at your place? She lives like 20 minutes from the airport. And then can I fly? Can I, stay at your house for a couple of nights and then I'll fly from Melbourne to Sydney, just do a day trip and then turn around and fly home. And then I'll see if I can get someone to come pick me up from Bendigo and take me to Bendigo on the Friday night. She was like, yeah, that's totally fine. So I'm like, okay, great. So now I'm leaving the 22nd of November to fly back to Victoria. I leave my suitcase at my girlfriend's house, and then I'll just literally do a flying trip up to Sydney, go to the Greek embassy office, have my appointment, apply for my visa, fly home that night, and then fingers crossed that my visa gets approved before the 12th of December. So how am I feeling about this? I have a very good feeling that it's all going to come through. Yeah, I know that the universe tests us in the most unique ways to see how resilient we are. I know that she's testing my strength right now. She's helping me build more resilience because I am about to be living in a different country that, doesn't all speak English. There's a lot of different things that I'm about to embark on. And so I know that all of this is happening for me right now. And I have full faith that it's all going to fall into place, even if it is down to the second. And it's just a huge level of trust and surrender, which is exactly the tattoo that I have tattooed on my left-hand side. That's in Spanish: trust and surrender, confiar en res. And this is just a whole new level of the trusting and surrendering of the entire process. And so that's where we're at. That's the entire story of what has happened, what has unfolded. And it's been challenging to sit in it, to navigate life, to navigate business, to be going through this stressful period and holding that space for yourself. And I know that there's going to be some really beautiful lessons that are going to drop through once all of this does come together. And I am truly grateful that I do have the ability to hold myself as I'm navigating these challenges that are coming up. And I feel like there's going to be some, like I said, some really beautiful lessons that are going to come out of this entire process that I will be able to share with many, many people. And I think even just the fact that, this overwhelmed state was a regular occurrence for my nervous system to feel that way. And so I think it's just even this beautiful reminder of like, remember that this used to be your natural state of being. And, you know, it's a beautiful reminder of, yes, I'm still human. And yes, this is how I used to be. And wow, how I've handled this is really beautiful. So I share this with you because perhaps some things in your life right now are not going the way that you thought that they were going to go. And so, what would it look like for you to lean in, to soften, to allow yourself to feel all of the feelings that are coming up in order for you to expand? Because if you think about a flower, if you watch a flower, a rose in slow motion, it actually contracts before it expands and opens a bit more. And it does that at each level. And so if you think about a flower needs to do that in order to have its full bloom, we are just like nature. So sometimes we have to contract in order to expand. That contraction is equally as important as the expansion. So how can you lean in a little bit more and allow yourself to soften, allow yourself to feel all of those feelings, and trust that it is all happening for you, and that you get to take the lessons out of this into the next part of your journey. So whatever's going on for you in your life right now, I really encourage you to just sit with it and ask yourself, how can I soften? It's okay that I don't know the meaning of it. It's okay that I can't make sense of it right now. But if it's not going the way that you thought it was going, it's happening. You learn in order to rise, in order to be reborn. Yeah, you chose this part of your lifetime to come down and experience the human experience. So what would that look like for you to lean in, to soften, to create containers for you to feel all of your feelings? And maybe it's a test for you to ask for help. Yeah, maybe it's a test for you to not keep thinking you have to do this on your own. Maybe you need to reach out to someone and get some support, like I had to. There's so much power in listening to what your body is trying to tell you. It's just that we are running such a rat race life that we don't allow ourselves to actually tune into the body and say, what are you trying to tell me right now? What are you trying to tell me? And so for me, this was all about learning how to trust that everything happens as it's supposed to. And like I shared with you before, there was some lessons of like, you know, did I try to avoid these feelings? And that's why I'm angry, because I paid someone and so I didn't want to feel the feelings. But the truth is that all expansion requires us to feel all the feelings. There's no way getting around that. So if you are struggling, or you are in this season right now where things aren't going right, I see you, and I'm so honored to share this story with you in hope that it helps give you some light at the end of it, that it will all be okay. It's all happening for you. Lean in and get what it is that you need out of this, because it's going to make a beautiful part of your story. I promise you that. Until next time, babe, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.